A phone call in the middle of the night does not bode well. Dorothy learned this when her husband was still alive. Often he got calls at night and was required to go to work. The night is the perfect time for crimes, and he was a policeman. He died when their son was 6 years old. And now, Charles is 28. Her son's name popped up on the cell phone screen. Her heart raced anxiously, and she immediately answered the call with anxiety in her heart. "Hello, dear," Dorothy answered in a hoarse, sleepy voice. "Mom, sorry to wake you." Charles's voice sounded worried. "Did Molly have another heart attack?" Dorothy asked anxiously. "Yes, we're in the hospital. I've decided to sell the apartment and the car. There are no other options anymore. Can we live at your place for a while?" the son asked his mother. "Yes, absolutely. But how can the four of us live in a one-bedroom apartment? Wait, don't be in such a hurry to sell it. We have to think this through. Maybe we should ask some charity foundations for help," Dorothy asked anxiously. "There's no time. That's why I'm calling you. The attack was so bad that I thought of the worst possible outcome. The doctor said that if we wait one more week, it'll be too late to do surgery," Charles said sadly. "Hold on, son. I have another idea. Let's sell my apartment. It's downtown, and the cost of my apartment is much higher." Dorothy told him about the idea suddenly occurring in her mind. There was silence on the phone. "Hello, Charles? Are you there?" the woman asked. "Mom, Stacy and I agree. Then you will move to our apartment. That would really be better. Can you handle it? We just need to sell it fast," the son said embarrassedly. "I'll do my best," Dorothy promised. She couldn't fall asleep again. Her only granddaughter was suffering. She had to think it over and do everything possible. Dorothy got up, put on her robe, and headed to the kitchen to make coffee. After graduation, Charles got a good job. Dorothy was proud of her smart and handsome son. He enjoyed the attention of many girls. "Just don't be in a hurry to get married. At least you have to buy your own place," Dorothy told him. But Charles did not follow his mother's advice. He fell in love, became absent-minded, went somewhere every night, and sometimes didn't even come home at night. "When will you introduce me to your girlfriend?" Dorothy asked one day. 3 days later, he'd invited Stacy, a skinny, beautiful girl with huge gray eyes, and at the same moment, Dorothy gasped, noticing Stacy's huge, round belly. They got married quickly. On their wedding day, they just had tea and cake at home. When Charles was at work, Stacy hardly ever left the room. Dorothy once asked her to help with the cooking in the kitchen. She was trying to make friends with her son's wife. Stacy walked into the kitchen, glanced around, and said, "This is your kitchen, so you are the one who has to cook here." Then she went into her and Charles's room. Dorothy failed to make friends with Stacy. Stacy would only go into the kitchen to eat and didn't even wash the dishes. Dorothy complained to her son, "Mom, don't bother her. She's just not used to the new place yet. She's shy, she's pregnant." Charles defended his wife. Dorothy did not like Stacy. She wasn't happy being a maid for her son and his wife. She didn't mind cooking, shopping, or cleaning. What else could she do at home? After all, she was retired. But her son had his own family now. His wife is supposed to take care of her husband. What will they do when the baby is born? Eventually, Dorothy decided she couldn't live with the young couple and interfere in their lives. She sold the 3-bedroom apartment she inherited from her parents and used the money to buy 2 apartments. She moved into a 1-bedroom apartment downtown, and her son and his wife moved into a 2-bedroom apartment in a new building on the outskirts of the city. Let them live the way they want. A week after moving in, Stacy gave birth to a weak baby girl. And at the age of 4, Molly was diagnosed with a complex heart defect. Doctors advised her to have surgery abroad. There they wouldn't have to have waited that long. but the price would have been much higher. They tried to contact charitable foundations, but Molly was getting worse, and her attacks increased. There was no time left to raise money. Dorothy waited until morning, and then she moved into action. She made phone calls, made appointments with realtors. Dorothy sold the apartment quickly, along with some of the furniture. She sold the rest of it almost for free to friends and acquaintances. 3 days later, she gave the money to her son. Dorothy didn't want to make her son and daughter-in-law feel uncomfortable. Stacy always acted pompous and had a bad temper. Dorothy didn't want to accept something she didn't like. So she called her high school friend Rachel and asked to stay at her place. "Dorothy, I'd love to help, but you know that my personal life just started to get better. Robert moved in with me," her friend said with a guilty voice. "Okay, don't worry, I'll find some other options," Dorothy replied, and was about to hang up when Rachel shouted into the phone, "Wait, Dorothy! I have a house in the village. I wanted to sell this house, but I don't have time for that. It's a very modest house, but it has all the essentials. There's even a stove and a well with clean water. The house is 15 minutes from town by bus. Come and get the keys," the friend suggested. As the cab pulled up to the old shabby house with a broken fence, Dorothy thought she had the wrong address. Is it even possible to live here? The fence had fallen down, one window was broken, the roofing was leaky, and the door was crooked. The cab driver took her luggage out of the trunk and drove away. Dorothy sighed and went into the house. She put the luggage on the floor and cried for the first time in a long while. But that couldn't fix the situation. It was her own decision not to live with her son, so she would have to live here. Dorothy looked around the house and found cheap paper wallpaper in the basement. But first, the roof must be repaired. There were different houses in the village, expensive stone houses behind high fences and renovated wooden ones. Most of the owners came here only for the summer and on weekends, but someone lived in the village all year round. At the little store where Dorothy went to get groceries, she asked the sales clerk who could fix the roof and the window and help her to repair the house. "Ah, Peter can help," the talkative clerk, Jenny, advised. "He has golden hands and never refuses to help. Peter lives on the next street, in the house with the green fence." "Oh, there he is!" Jenny pointed out the window at a tall man walking by in rubber boots and a hat pulled over his forehead. Dorothy grabbed her bag and rushed to catch up with him. "Peter, wait!" she shouted, struggling to catch up with him. He stopped and turned toward her. Dorothy expected to see an old man, but as she got closer, she realized that he was her age, or maybe just a little older. Peter looked at Dorothy intently, which made her confused. But then she hurriedly and confusedly began to explain her request. "I'll stop by in an hour," Peter said calmly and moved on. Dorothy looked after him confusedly and went home. Peter arrived 2 hours later. He measured the window, checked the roof space, peeked into the barn, and without saying a word, walked toward the exit. "Where are you going? What about the roof?" Dorothy confusedly called out to him. "I have to get the materials. I'll fix the roof tomorrow," Peter replied without looking back. Dorothy realized it would be very difficult to find common ground with a sullen and taciturn man. But that is not a problem. The most important thing is that he repairs the house. It was the end of September, it often rained, and it was already cold at night. In the morning, the sound of footsteps above her head woke her up. At first she was frightened, but then she guessed that Peter had climbed onto the roof. She didn't bother him, though she was curious. He pounded on the roof with a hammer until late at night. Then, without entering the house, he left without a word. Dorothy went outside, stepped away, and looked at the roof. All the holes were carefully mended. The next day it had been raining since morning. Peter arrived later, letting Dorothy sleep in. He fixed the window and the door, which was crooked. He did everything silently, thoroughly, and without haste. 3 days later, he fixed the fence. And then a truck pulled up to the house, and the young driver unloaded the firewood by the fence. Dorothy ran out of the house and asked what it was, why, and who had ordered it. Well, it's firewood, the young driver replied cheerfully. The next day, Peter was sawing firewood in the middle of the yard. Dorothy came out of the house and watched him work for a while. She could see the muscles in his arms and back beneath his over-laundered t-shirt. Suddenly he stopped and looked at Dorothy. "If you help me, it'll go faster," he said. Dorothy was about to protest, but she changed her mind and took the other end of the saw. "Don't yank it. Pull it smoothly," Peter commanded. "This is total arbitrariness. You didn't even ask me if I needed firewood or not. What if I don't have the money to pay for it? What if I leave tomorrow?" she asked Peter. "If you wanted to leave, you would have left a long time ago. You got new wallpaper and asked to fix the roof. And you don't have enough firewood for the season. You'll freeze to death," Peter said as he continued sawing firewood. Dorothy was silent, trying to figure out how to ask him about the money. "Don't worry, I won't rob you. I ordered the firewood a long time ago. I gave half of it to you and kept half for myself," Peter said calmly, as if he had heard her thoughts. Suddenly, it began to rain, and they had to stop working. Peter put on his jacket and went home, but he didn't show up the next day, or the day after. Dorothy was worried and went to see him. She slowly entered the spacious, solid house and saw Peter lying in bed under 2 blankets. She touched his forehead, and it was hot. Dorothy rushed home and brought medicine, boiled some water, and when Peter woke up, she gave him pills and hot herbal tea. She checked his refrigerator and found a chicken. 2 hours later, she brought him a pot of chicken soup. Peter accepted her help without objection, as if there was nothing unusual about it. Dorothy thought he wasn't surprised to see her in his house. 3 days later, he was sawing firewood again in her yard, and Dorothy was stacking it in a pile under the roof. "That's it. If you need anything else, let me know," he said, putting on his jacket, ready to leave. "But what about the money? How much do I owe you? You never mentioned," Dorothy asked. "I think we're even," Peter said, and didn't leave, looking at Dorothy. He was looking at her in a way that made her feel embarrassed. "So, did you run away from your husband?" he suddenly asked. "What makes you think that? My husband died a long time ago. I sold my apartment. I needed the money for my granddaughter's surgery," the woman replied. "Did you help your granddaughter?" the man asked. "Yes, she had heart surgery abroad. My son called and said they'd be back soon," Dorothy replied with happiness in her eyes. She had no idea why she had told this sullen and taciturn man everything about it. "So you sold the apartment and came to live at Rachel's house," the man specified. "Do you already know all about it?" Dorothy said excitedly. "I know. Rachel and I grew up in the same village. I was even in love with her a long time ago. But she married a guy from the city," the man replied sadly. "Why didn't you marry her?" asked Dorothy. "It was too late. He beat me to it," Peter replied honestly. Dorothy took the phone out of her pocket for some reason and tried to turn it on, but the screen didn't light up. Her phone was dead. She found the charger, put the phone on charge, and when she looked outside, Peter had already left. Dorothy looked at the phone screen and saw a missed call from her son and immediately decided to call him back. "Mom, where are you? I thought you were staying at our place. I even called our neighbors. I couldn't reach you," the anxious son shouted. "I live at my friend's house. Everything's fine. The charge of my phone died, so you couldn't reach me." "How's Molly?" the mother asked. "Great. She's smiling. Can you imagine? Do you want to talk to her?" The son held out the phone to his daughter. Dorothy heard her granddaughter's joyful voice and cried. "Mom, don't cry. It's finally over. We made it, thanks to you." The son tried to comfort his mother when he heard her cry. In a week, they would all be back home. Dorothy was also going back to the city. She came to say goodbye to Peter. "Are you leaving for good or what?" he asked glumly. "Or what? I want to see my granddaughter, and then I'll be back. I miss them so much," the woman replied. Dorothy visited her son and granddaughter. Molly had recovered, and there was a blush on her cheeks. "Mom, maybe you'll stay," the son said, when he found out his mother was living in the village. "No, I don't want to be a burden, but I will visit you often. The village is not far from the city, and I will take Molly with me for the summer. The fresh air will help her recover quickly, she said. Well, let me call you a cab, her son said. No need. I'll take the bus. It's not far, the mother replied calmly. Dorothy hurried home. Over the past month, she got used to village life and even enjoyed it. The village was quiet and peaceful. What more could she have wanted? On her way to the train station, she bought some groceries. And when she entered the house, she stared in surprise at the bouquet of wildflowers on the table. It was warm and clean, and Dorothy guessed that Peter had done it all. She cooked dinner, went to Peter's house, and invited him over to celebrate her granddaughter's homecoming. First, Peter refused, but he came anyway. A month later, Rachel came to visit Dorothy. She couldn't believe her eyes when she saw the transformed, beautiful house. I'll sell it for a lot more money now, her friend said excitedly. Do you want to sell the house? Dorothy was frightened. Yes, you know, Robert and I have decided to get married. I'm going to sell the house and we're going to buy a car. But don't worry, I'm not going to sell the house right now. Probably in the spring. You can stay here for now, Rachel muttered. But Dorothy felt that the quiet life was over. She was wondering what she was going to do now. Perhaps she would have to live in her son's apartment after all, since she had no money for rent. But her relationship with her husband's wife, Stacy, was finally getting better. She didn't want to ruin it. Peter helped her. He found out that Dorothy wanted to leave and came to convince her to stay. You dreamed of inviting your granddaughter to the village for the whole summer. I guess it wasn't meant to be, Dorothy sighed. I don't want to leave either. I'm used to living here. So stay. I have a big, solid house. It's so beautiful here in the spring. I'll make a gazebo in the garden. We'll drink tea outdoors, said Peter, and fell silent. Dorothy was silent too, not knowing what to say. I don't even know what to say, the woman said embarrassedly. My life will be a misery without you, Peter answered bluntly, as he always did, and waited for an answer. Are you proposing to me? Asked Dorothy excitedly. Yes, for the first time in my life, the man replied. Dorothy stayed in the village. She did not expect to be so happy in her old age. Trouble and misfortunes suddenly turned into happiness. Life moved on, leaving troubles and sorrows behind, behind, behind.